to our third webinar from the Learn and Teaching Network this year. It's been an interesting year, 2020, as we've just been saying, for everybody, and with COVID and vaccines and all sorts of things intruding on our lives. But I'm hopeful that 2021 will bring a change, and hopefully we'll get back to face-to-face meetings and enjoying each other's company again. But for now, we'll continue our discussions. And today we have more of our executive committee, and we're going to have a short input from each of them on teaching for the future, building on social awareness with empathy. And we have two of our facilitators, Dr. Suzanne Muller-Using and Anton de Vries. And Suzanne will begin, I think, is that right? With a short piece from her background. She's an expert on intercultural education. And she's going to talk to us about some of the socially sensitive teaching and the importance of education for more social awareness in the classroom. And Suzanne has a very wide range of experience, both locally in Europe and internationally. And she's going to talk about how we can cultivate social awareness and empathy to create sustainable classroom interactions. This will be followed after about 10 to 12 minutes from Anton, who is a trainer consultant in what's called the Building Learning Power program. And he's going to provide some examples of how teachers can develop and enhance empathy among students, what he calls one of the 17 learning muscles used in the learning power approach. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what both Suzanne and Anton have to say. So I'll happily hand over to Suzanne to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Here it's starting already. Yeah, we can already switch to the first slide. And as announced, Anton and me will talk about empathy, social awareness, and for that, we will focus firstly on the question, why should we cultivate that? So why we put it as a topic for this lecture and why we are thinking that it could be from benefit. And then to go over to think about how could we facilitate and nurture this kind of thinking among learners and teachers. And then especially Anton will talk very practically, very concrete about how to cultivate empathy in the classroom. Okay, let's have a look here. Why should we cultivate empathy? So maybe on a personal level, we have different opinions about the importance of empathy. So maybe in a context where we are used to work socially, as in schools and kindergartens, can be also in hospitals or with elderly people, there most of the people is convinced empathy is helpful because it's part of the daily work routine. But also if we look among science, there is a very nice study and reflection from Jeremy Rifkin, and he is talking from empathy like the red line in human evolution, and his work figures out that better as from Homo sapiens, we should talk from Homo empathicus, from the human being, because empathy, as you see here also in the image, is something in us. It's nothing we have to learn from outside, but it's something we can stimulate. Sometimes already our surroundings stimulate empathy, as we see it here in the little boy who is recognizing a social situation and intention, and he's just stepping in to help and to make this intention a real one. What here will be a bit difficult because of the materials and because this statue is not flexible, but the intention is very clear. And for a definition of empathy, I like very much one definition from Bischof Köhler. She is a psychologist, development psychologist, and she says says that empathy is an experience to directly participate in the emotional situation or intention of another person. And now the important part, despite of this participation, the feeling or intention, however, belongs to the other person. So I don't mix up what I see in the feelings of the other or in the intention of the other with my personal feelings and intentions. And this is a very important criteria when we talk from empathy, that this differentiation between me and the other is very clear. Also, also research shows that little children with maybe 18 months, when they separate, when they start to identify themselves as with me and call themselves me and I, then they are able to react empathically correct to other situations and other children, and this has a lot to do to develop empathy with being able to separate me and the other, and this is very interesting. Okay, now we can go to the next, and we will focus a bit on the pillars of education, because one thing is that empathy is something very inherent in the human being and maybe also important for the development of human society. But the other question is, what about education and what education offers here? And still, I think, even though detected and described in 1996, is from huge importance, the 4 pillars of education, which I make them, which I edit one, as I will show you in a minute. So the learning to know, the learning to do, the learning to be, and the learning to live together. We should think that all this is already implemented widely and commonly in our schools, but it is not. And I added the learning to think because nowadays the ability of critical thinking, of being able to organize knowledge, information, is more and more important, because information is not the matter. We don't need schools to get information. Information we get through the media, through the internet, through many other pools. But what we really need to learn and need youngsters to learn is to organize this information and to think about it and to get order and to get everything on the right place. Okay, next slide. Just to get in a bit deeper here, the learning to think means something as reasonable thinking, well-formed common sense, but also practical thinking, what I just explained, the critical thinking to recognize if there is some logical hint or disorder, reflexive thinking, the moral thinking, being able to have a judgment, to orientate in the golden rule, to have this orientation in the thinking. The next one. Then the second pillar I want to point out here is the learning to live together. I pointed out here, of course, because we are talking about empathy and social awareness, but also because I think that in our high achievement societies, knowledge societies, the orientation on performance and output is still very strong into the school. So we have these concepts of 4 pillars of education and learning to be, learning to live together, learning to know, but there is not a balanced attention to them. And so it's good to take out the ones I think we should foster more in our daily education. So the interest and respect for others and for the nature, to be more aware about the context, means also to take children out of the classroom. Communication and language skills, to be able to express and to have dialogues together. Also to understand social rules and acceptance, to understand the meaning of the social rules, the meaning for peacefully live together. The human rights, but also the human responsibilities. No rights without responsibilities. So what does means these responsibilities, and how do we step in there? To understand the pluricultural world, the knowledge, that it is not one knowledge better than the other, so that it's just in other contexts, other kind of knowledge developed, and it's something interesting what can yeah, help us to understand the world differently and in a better way. So the question is, how can we find a balance between the individualism and performance orientated focus to more social integration and social responsibility focus, with which also is important when we talk about sustainability, because sustainability becomes relevant if we open from ourselves to the context. And this is the natural context as well as the social context. So this opening and this inclusion in a good way should be, yeah, more focus in schools. And this is what when we foster empathy, this is what also will happen. Okay, next one. So another argument why this is important to do is that children are always fully present. Yeah, they are not only present with the thinking, they are not only present with the emotion and only with the social behavior. They are always completely present. So they always learn, they always get socialized, and they are always developing themselves despite of the context they are in. So if we want a good education context, we have to think and to have in mind the effect of our teaching and learning, and how it has an effect on the learning, how it has an effect on the socialization, and how it has an effect on the self-development. Even though we want to teach math and to understand some rules in dealing with numbers, we have to think at the same time, how am I socializing in my lesson? How am I supporting the self-development of my children? We cannot separate this, it's integrated. And for a professional competence, which has this in mind and is aware of a context and of this holistic point of view of education, it's very important not only to prepare a lesson well in connection to the class I have there, but only to make a society analysis, situation diagnosis, and a self-reflection. Yeah, it's the context must be worked, even though I have a clear red line in my lesson, and I will not talk. How you say, I will not talk maybe intensive on society analysis, but my lesson changes if I have clear in my context the society analysis and the situation diagnosis. So it's very important to have this more wider contextual thinking. Okay, next slide. Yeah, coming back to the empathy. and how it can help us within this more social aware and more context orientated thinking and education. Some basics are that empathy has very much to do with the perception of emotional state of others. And for that, one key or one information is the facial expression. This is what scientists found out. In a moment with the mask, this is maybe a bit difficult, but we are lucky, the ones who had seen many faces in their lives. We can even though recognize something in the eye expression and in the corporal expression. So we are not only depending on facial expression, but it's something what is important for us to recognize emotional states also in the pupils. But then it's also important the association of experiences, of lived experiences with a situation. So if I see a situation, maybe I have experienced something similar before. Maybe I have been my same in a situation, or I have dealt with a similar situation. So I put here the experience of injustice. We know how it feels if someone is treated with injustice. So this is something which gives us a knowledge, a kind of knowledge out of the experience. Yeah, it's not so much from the expression or behavior of the other, but from experience. And then it's also that the perception and analyzing of situations, is the context has some knowledge and information inherent. So it's very important also to always to know the context of a person, of a pupil, of a student, to understand a bit better what I'm observing, what my perception is about. And I think this is very important also, not to read only from a moment, a state. Emotional states can be helpful, but it's also very important to bring it into a context, to understand and to have a right right answer to this situations and to this perceptions. But it's very interesting that a study found out, it was in a big cluster. It's called Language of Emotion, from German research cluster from German and other international universities. They studied the phenomenon of alexithymia, and alexithymia is a low capacity of reading emotions. So they found out for Germany that more or less 14% of the Germans are affected by alexithymia, so that they have a low capacity to read feelings. And this, of course, is a difficulty in the moment you want to show, or you need to show, an empathic behavior or empathic answer to a situation, an empathic solution for something. And what we can say is that empathy helps a lot to bring together the point of views and to bridge somehow situations, and to bridge also information, and to make easier communication, because I understand the point of view of the other, or at least I'm aware that the other person is in their own shoes, and I need to communicate, and I need to observe, and I need to perceive also emotionally what is going on there. Okay, next slide. To train this, and this is, I'm nearly coming to the end, to train this for teachers, what I think it's really, really, really important that teachers are prepared in this way. value formation and reflection on the intention of education and learning, of course, some basic source, because it's nothing so new in education, but also practical experience in dealing with children, because children have a bit other ways to express their emotions, their thinkings, and they are so often so stuck in an adult world. So it's very not so easy for children and youngsters to be understood by adults. And I think this is something we could foster in teacher training. Learning from case studies, it's very helpful, and we have good experience with that. Practicing active listening and nonviolent communication, also nothing new, but not so much in teacher training. So somehow we need to bring better and more consequently together the knowledge we already have. And also for teachers to be able to have a good perception of situations, it's very important to have contemplation and awareness. So a little bit of contemplation and awareness training is really helpful to be more open to understand these parts. One way, the social context and awareness and responsibility, and on the other part, the very often individual and empathy, understanding and reception. Okay. Yeah, I wrote a book about ethos and empathy, where I did a study in between teacher students. So it's only in German, so for the ones who can read German, they can have a look in there. There's also more about empathy as a knowledge. So I treat empathy as a knowledge, because I think it's in our knowledge society, it's very important to make understand that information is not knowledge, it's not the same as knowledge, and not cognitive knowledge is the only way of knowledge we can have relation to. But there are other knowledge forms, and this we know about the tacit knowledge discourse, and we should include them more and more in our teacher training. Thank you so much, and I give the word to Anton.
Okay.
Thank you, Suzanne. Just before you begin, Anton, we'll let Anton finish, and then we might take a few questions at the end. But just a very lovely overview of empathy and the importance of that kind of skill in teaching and education right now. And Suzanne, thank you very much. And Anton, over to you for building learning power.
Yeah, I will start with a short assignment. And please write it in the chat in 2 sentences, maybe 3 sentences. Can you remember a good teacher from your own time at school, and what made him or her special? For instance, I had to remember very hard to remember a good teacher. It was in my primary school. It was a very traditional school, but there was one young teacher, Auke Steensma, and he was really a pedagogue, and he really saw us all and make connection with us. So that was a very warm and very good teacher for me. So I will go on with my presentations, and during this presentation, please write a few sentences if you can remember a good teacher from your time. And at the end, I will come back at this question. So I'm just very shortly give a little input about building learning power. Then I will go to the social part of it, where you see one of the so-called learning muscles, empathy and listening. And I will show some examples in schools. I'm a trainer consultant at the NL Stender University in Leeuwarden in the Netherlands. And I'm 10 years building learning power trainer consultant. It's designed by Professor Guy Claxton around 2000, and its aim is to helping young people become better learners, both in school and out. The BLP approach, learning power approach, is designed by Guy Claxton, and it's about creating a culture in classrooms that systematically cultivates habits and attitudes that enable young people to become better learners. So there are 4 areas. Resilience has to do with the emotional part of learning. So it's about being ready and willing and able to lock on the learning. Resourcefulness is more being ready, willing, and able to learn in different ways, cognitive part. The reflectiveness is more the strategic way of learning. And the reciprocity is being ready, willing, and able to learn alone and with others. And this last part, I will tell some more and give you some examples on the schools who building learning power as a school development in their schools. The basic is training learning capacities into good learning habits. And I talk with the students, pupils with learning muscles. It's a sort of metaphor, like in sports, you can, if you do it in the right way and make enough hours, you can become better. So it's a lot about the growth mindset also. And the whole area of the social part is empathy and listening is a very important part. And then you have to think about, are you aware how you respond to other? Show you are listening by making eye contact and your body language. Can you hear feelings or thoughts that are something that has said? Put yourself in the other people's shoe to choose to see the world from their point of view, even if you don't agree with them. So now some examples. It's a system. All the learning capacities, the learning muscles are related to each other. So we take a part to train them, but it's of course it's a system which are very connected. Now you see a visual display of an ear, and the meaning of it is to show displays on the classroom walls to remember pupils this learning muscle and show some strategies which they can use so they can train them by seeing it. This is a sort of taxonomy of listening. So -3, it's listening from your own judgment and perspective. And 0 is neutral, is giving space to speak, and 4 is accepting and acknowledging the other. So in the classroom, even with young children, they have talked about what is good listening, what is empathy. And then it's with their strategies on the wall, the classroom wall. So if at one point somebody is not listening very well, and then the teacher can say, oh, I think you're now at, where are you now? -2? How do you come to +1? What do you need? So it's all about being aware what is good listening and how to change your position therein. So here's an example. We call this dual focus learning. It's the process and the content. Here's an example. This boy, there were 2 pupils playing on the schoolyard, and it was agreed that the shovels, that they couldn't be taken outside of the sandbox. The third boy commanded these 2 about this agreement, and that the boys should listen to them and take the shovels back. But they didn't. So he ran into the classroom, took the display and showed them like this, you have to listen now to me because we agreed. And then the boys were so impressed that they took the shovels back to the sandbox. So it's a very nice way of what this is doing with young pupils also, to train this in an active way. There's another example with kindergarten, very young pupils. They are receiving a microphone and try to exercise what is a question, what is listening, and what is answering. So it's very real for them now to do it very active by using a microphone. And notice at back there is this green and red ear as a display, and they agreed and talked about what is good listening, that's the green zone, and what is bad listening, it's the red zone. So even without words, you can train youngsters listening positions and try to make them better listeners. Another thing you can do is by putting red and blue footprints on the floor, and you have a dilemma. And they have to stand on one on the blue footprints, the other on the red footprints, and they have to use arguments and have a dialogue to give why they, for instance, is it okay to bully a bullier? So the blue one is yes, you can do that. The red one, no, you can't, and they have to have a dialogue. And then suddenly they have to stop their discussion and they have to change in perspective. So the blue one has to step on the red ones, and the red one has to step on the blue ones. So they really are forced into another perspective and try to see the point of view of the other one. And this you can use if you train this with a group in all kinds of situation, maybe when there's an argument in the classroom or whatever. So it's trainable. And two other examples, it's from England, the buddy bus stop. There was a social program in that school, and if you felt lonely, you can, on the playground, you can go to the buddy bus stop, and another pupil will come along and ask you to join them. So it's make a mark, go there and invite them to play with you in a new group. It needs a program, of course, not just simple do design. It needs a program to train this. And of course, the talking stick, I think most of you will recognize this, is a way, if you have the stick, then you only can speak and the rest have to listen. It's a democracy instrument used by many tribes. So it's also an active way in start to listening to the other. So why are we doing this? Building learning power, the learning power approach, I have to say, they draw the learning river. In the current above is the knowledge, is the curriculum. We all trained to do this thing. We all are teachers who teach knowledge, and we all trained to do some skills and literacy. Building learning power tries to add the attitude with the knowledge. So this is that dual focus. Teaching and learning is try to make pupils show different attitudes while doing their content. And so why is it so important? Well, maybe they can see more possibilities. Maybe they like to deeper into things and can handle more complex matters, or are they only going for the right answer or the grades? And in case of empathy, do they show respect for each other and their own work? Or can they take a perspective of another, even if they don't agree? So I think that's very important lessons to combine the slower undercurrent with the fast knowledge current. Okay, and how to start tomorrow? Well, the best thing is to model empathy. And this is also one of the quotes of Guy Claxton. I think it's very interesting. If we want young people to develop the habits of thinking for themselves, using their imagination, being open to new ideas, exploring real challenges together, then they have to see their teachers doing the same thing. And now I'm interested in some of the answers, hopefully typed in the chat. Elma, is there an interesting answer in the chat?
Yes, there are very many interesting answers in the chat, but I will single out just a few to sparkle the discussion. Yeah. So Martin said that the good teacher reaches 80% of the class every day, and the great teacher reaches a different 80% every day.
Interesting.
And Carol said that she had a math teacher who had a way of engaging the whole class and making each lesson really interesting, as if everything was a mystery or magic to be understood.
Yeah, I think it's very, very interesting, because I think there are many good examples of this, but it has always something to do with relatedness, making good connections with your teacher and your pupils. It has mostly something to do with competence, gave you the feeling that you were competent to do all the things, or has something to do with autonomy, gave you the space to explore and take responsibility, etc. And the interesting point is, if you know what your teachers were inspiring you, what are you doing now at this moment when you are in front of the classroom? So I think by modeling empathy, we can all start training our pupils and they will imitate this. So I think this is my final slide. It's a very interesting concept that building learning power, of the learning power approach. If you Google it, there's a lot of on YouTube and also on the internet. It's in the curriculum of Australia, New Zealand and England, but also now in the Netherlands. So it's very interesting. So I think we can stop here our presentation. Martin? Martin, you are mute.
Thanks very much, Anton. That was really interesting because we got a lovely balance of kind of the theoretical framework around empathy and education and the kind of social skills and critical thinking skills and the environmental kind of development that come with empathy. And then you brought us to a lovely set of examples of how empathy can be used in a daily way with children in terms of techniques and skill sets. I love the ear image. I thought that was a really interesting one, you know. It reminded me of Mark Twain, you know, Mark Twain, the great American novelist. He said one time that if God wanted us to talk more and listen less, he'd have given us 2 mouths and 1 ear instead of 2 mouths. I often think of that when sometimes when I'm teaching myself and I say, Martin, I'm talking too much, so stop. And listen is really important. And I do think having 2 ears is a significant feature on our physiology. Anyway, but thank you both for really interesting thoughts. And I think in this COVID environment and in the kind of context of where education is going, and you think back to when Charles started our first webinar, he talked about, you know, bringing back better, you know, returning to education with new ideas, with a different thinking, because this pandemic has changed the way we think about education. I think some of those ideas today, I think, reflect the direction I think we need to go. So with that, I'm going to open the conversation to the floor or to the screen or whatever you want to call it. And we'll take questions, comments, or any feedback, please. So who'd like to begin? Away you go. We have a small number, so I don't think we have to worry too much about hands up or things like that. So anyone like to?
Yeah, can I pick up, Martin? You mentioned Mark Twain. I'm reminded of Harper Lee in To Kill a Mockingbird, where he actually says if you want to understand another person, you actually have to get right under his skin or crawl into his skin to see things from his perspective, which is a kind of, to me, a one-way view of empathy. The whole idea of empathy being two-way traffic. Are the signals that you're sending necessarily the ones that are being received? And I'm mindful of what Susanna said about reading facial expressions and different contexts. For example, I know in countries like China, where people are very, very difficult for Westerners to understand what's going on. When I say to the taxi driver, can you take me to this place? And there is a sort of a blank look. And what you actually want to say is, please give me a sign. But that is that you've got to again show the empathy with the cultural background there. So I was reminded of that. And when you talk to children, that the different ways that they are brought up to respond. When you hear a teacher saying, look at me when I'm talking to you. And in fact, in some cultures, that is rude.
Yeah.
You hang your head in shame. So thank you, Susanna, for opening that one up.
Yeah, You're welcome. I guess this is a very important thing you're mentioning and lighting up here, because luckily we have some basic facial expressions which we all share. What this is a bit based on Eggman's research on basic emotions, what is interculturally significant and also understandable. But of course, our cultural context and the behavior we learned in this cultural context, and to the learning what is adequate, what is inadequate, of course, is very important. And it's more important when we are teaching also, classrooms where we have pupils from different countries, for example. So it's very important that teachers grasp some knowledge from this cultural context where these pupils are coming from, to understand and to avoid a bit misunderstandings also about the individualistic point of view and the more how you say community orientated point of view. This is such different, and the priorities are just different. And societies which are not so much individualistic orientated, they just come to other priorities, which for a Northern European person are very difficult to understand in the first point. And you need a dialogue, you need to understand a bit of these differences and to evaluate them and to recognize them firstly. Yeah, I think it's very important to help a bit to get down these misunderstandings, because there always will be. It's not so big problem. There are misunderstandings, but we need to recognize them and sometimes also take them with a bit sense of humor, not to be so hard on that.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come in there?
I think possibly referring to the learning river there, I think one of our greatest challenges, particularly this year and probably next year in the pandemic world, is be training our young teachers. And we would have this year, a small country, we would have about 2,500 teachers in training and doing placements in classrooms, yet we're never actually going to see them in practice. We, as trainers and tutors, we end up looking over their written work and interviewing them at night time on Zoom. One of the things was mentioned there was the attitudes and dispositions, which will be frightfully important and difficult to assess from written and a Zoom conversation. I think this is something that is probably common in other countries as well.
It's a very interesting point, Mike. I'd love to get other people's response to that. Are you familiar with what's happening in other countries around teacher training at the moment? Is that the kind of, is that what's happening in your kind of environment as well? Anyone familiar with teacher education in your own countries at the moment?
I can say a few words. First of all, everything is suspended and it's all online. The schools are open, but practice teaching is not going on. So it's a real mess. I was thinking regarding empathy, I think the huge challenge ahead for us is that we know there only a small portion of students are thriving and doing well with online learning. At least here in North America. It's almost a wasted year. We keep switching back and forth from online to trying to open up, try to keep the classes going as much as we can, closing some schools for 3 weeks and opening and so on. So there are going to be a number of students who have really fallen behind. how are we going to engage these students while those that were coached by their parents through the whole thing and are thriving and doing very, very well and are going to be bored? So how are we going to not separate, but at the same time individualize? I mean, it's always been a problem, but if we, you know, categorize and put people into special learning situations, whatever we want to call it, I think this is going to be a huge challenge that engages empathy and at the same time. And I don't think our teacher education programs can deal with that. It's not there on the priority. You know, how do we almost restart? So it comes back to that first question that I mentioned in the first webinar. How do we build back better? It's an ongoing problem, but it is really exacerbated, and it's really in our, it will be in our face as we try to restart our education systems next September or whatever your startup date is.
That's a very interesting comment, Charles. And I think looking at Anton's river and the notion of the river and the first level, the knowledge, I think there'll be a big emphasis on building back knowledge, because there'll be an immediate response. Well, our children need to catch up on what they don't know.
Yeah.
You're suggesting it's the two other levels, the attitudes, the empathy, the actual other really important skills that may actually end up being lost or certainly underdeveloped in the next year, because there'll be such an emphasis on catching up on knowledge. Now, which worries me a small bit.
Yeah, and I think it's very important also to invite the students, once we have them again, to talk with them together and to have a group sitting together to share a bit the experiences, because they are really, as Charles said, the experiences of the children and youngsters are so different. So of course, because the homes are so different, because the economical background is so different. And I think the only way to bring this again together is also to cultivate this empathy and listening to each other. How was this time for you? How was this time for you? I guess that there are many experiences of violence in the family, because everyone is so stuck together, working from at home. Not everybody has a nice bureau from where he is working, and all this this cultivation and the educational context, which give you room to express yourself, to think about things. So this is very limited for some, because of space reasons, because of social reasons, but I think especially economic and space reasons. And it's very important not to oversee this, not once they are all back to do as now we are here, nothing happened, and we go on as ever. This will not work. Then we already lost a third of the class immediately.
When I have building learning power program with primary schools for mostly 3 years, I always ask the school in the first year to do a parent meeting about building learning power, because it's also learning in this way is also upbringing. So persevering, you teach also in the family position, and listening also. So it's a common goal to train youngsters in it. In primary situations, you can do that. It's harder with secondary or universities to train. It's also with families, but I think it's both interests to train it on the same level.
Well, Charles's point about getting building back better, I'm just thinking about that from, we're all aware of the different learning styles. And what's going through my mind at the moment is that it requires a certain learning style to learn online efficiently. And maybe when the children, and again, I'm on Anton's side with primary, when the children get back, there is maybe some value in actually going over the knowledge that everyone has missed. Or the children who work effectively online may have picked up knowledge, but in a different kind of a way. And therefore to repeat that will not necessarily be repetition, because it will give everybody a second chance. But what is missing from online, to me, is this whole point about those two substructures in the river that you can't efficiently do. And again, it goes back to Suzanne. You're over there on my screen, by the way. And the facial expressions and the nuances. And what I've described to people is that actually going the difference between online teaching and face-to-face teaching, it's like trying to turn interactive theatre into cinema.
Yeah,
And
Good analogy.
And they are two very, very different disciplines, both designed to convey one particular thing. And I think if we go back to getting the children back into the classroom, I don't think there's any harm. In fact, I think it can only enhance their understanding, but we've got to get that, we've got to look for opportunities for lessons to include social opportunities, empathetic opportunities. And we can add that layer in when we all get back to normal.
Thank you, Tim. Anyone else like to bring up any other issue? Yeah, Helen, you have your hand up there. Please do.
Yeah. Hang on, sorry, I'm muting it. Well, I mean, it really just sort of piggybacks on what other people have said. I was actually thinking about your point there, Martin. I have a fear that when children get back fully into the classroom, the emphasis is going to be so much on content. And what's going to be missing are the, I'm going to say inverted commas, the added extras, but the extras that shouldn't be extras, they should be really embedded in classroom teaching. And that includes obviously empathy, emotional intelligence, all those aspects, but it also includes, you know, creativity. So a wide range of things I fear are going to be lost that are so essential to our children's education.
Yeah, there's a danger that content and assessment become kind of prioritized. That would be a worry. That would be a worry. Thank you. Any other responses to that?
I think I
would. Rainer. Sorry, Brendan or Michael. Yeah, and then Rainer.
I think I would worry as well about young people who have gone into first-year university this year. They had a little bit of remote learning last year, and some of them handled it very badly. They've gone into their first year university this year. It will be remote learning practically all year, if not all year. Now, when it comes along to assessment time, I think it would be interesting to see how the results will come of a year on learning with no training in online learning and a year face-to-face. How will they compare? Or will they compare?
Well, I'm currently correcting assessments exactly in that situation, Michael. I've had all my students this semester in the college have been online, and it has been quite a challenge. And I'm looking at their assignments, and we try to get them to do presentations and different kinds of assignments to compensate for not being present. And I have noticed that the written and the quality of written work is not as good, certainly. But interestingly enough, the quality of presentation and engagement in those kind of assignments has been quite good. But my big question is always going to be about impact. I don't know what impact we're having, what impact I'm having as a teacher, but what impact this is all having on them. And you're right, it is a big concern. That's just been my experience just this semester. I'm very interested to hear if anyone else has any other comments on that.
I'd like to have a question to Suzanne. Can I?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Suzanne, I was very interested in your presentation. Thanks for your contributions. I was wondering, because you spoke just a little bit about human rights during your presentation. So I was curious about how human rights is placed in your studies, because This is something that interests me. My thesis is about the human rights education and the connections and relations that it has with quality of education. So, I'm curious about asking you how human rights education is placed into building up this empathy that you are suggesting. Yeah. So I would like to ask you about this, because we have a discussion here about what we consider as knowledge, and sometimes human rights education is not considered or giving its value in school. So for some teachers, and for others, no. So I was very curious about that. And I was curious also about how are you dealing with this building empathy during this pandemic time? Because you're talking to us about the importance of looking at each other, the importance of recognizing each other's facial reactions and body language and so on and so forth. So I'm curious about this, because I don't know the situation in your countries, but in our country here, we are dealing with very, very much difficulty with this remote teaching or distant learning, whatever we call it, we can name it. Because in public schools, the students don't have Wi-Fi. We are having a very demanding time into offering public education in Brazil nowadays, right? And in private education, we are working with Zoom at university. We're giving our classes through Zoom also. But as we are having difficulty into bringing the vaccines because of our government, and I cannot talk about it now because it's terrible, we are facing the real need to have this learning through a computer, this remote learning, into the whole next year. So how can we deal with this, building empathy for our students, when we have this reality that we are going to continue either in hybrid things or for us in Brazil, I believe we're going to continue having this type of learning for a very long time. So thanks for having me here, and nice meeting you all virtually.
Thank you for your questions. I will try to give you an answer. I start with the first one, with the human rights and how they are related to empathy. So I think the first point is that when we think about human rights education, we have to make clear that human rights are there to protect human dignity. So the concept of human rights is a concept of human dignity, which is there to be protected, to be also accepted, and to be recognized. Yeah. So, and this is a lot about teaching. So this human dignity, to understand a bit deeper what this human dignity means in our relation, in our human relations, is a topic of education, because it needs to be a bit worked out. The human rights are now articles defined for law. What is also important, because as they are law, they are not just nice to have, because they are somehow an obligation for our states to be implemented. So on the other hand, for education, we need to translate this law and articles into real life situations. And so the human rights education is trying very much to build up on that, to work in education topics of tolerance, topics of no discrimination, and topics of inclusion, topics of democracy, of values. What does it mean? So maybe the ethics of human rights education are what we have to include more and more in education, Next, to have clear what human rights are. In Germany, if you ask teachers about human rights, they are not able to give you any answer. Our Human Rights Institute did over all the country a study, and they are sometimes not even able to name one human right. Also, they think they are very important. Everybody, if you ask, do you think human rights are important? Yes, they are important. Are they included in education? Yes, in German education they are included. But then you ask what is included and how it's included, and there's much too less. Let's say, I don't want to say nothing because it sounds too sad, but it is somehow the fact. So this is the way we are working on the empathy, somehow to connect this empathy with the perception of human dignity. There is the link. And we work on human rights education very much as the ethics of human rights education, and to have ethical relationships between adults, but also between adults and youngsters, and to have the listening is important, to be respectful, not to harm with our comments about work done by children, not to say, oh, what is this? Looks like a picture from a 5-year-old, but you are already in 4th class. What is this? Yeah, because this happens nowadays. We send students in classroom just to observe harmful behavior of teachers, and a quarter of all observations are highly harmful behavior. So, and this is something we can work about. Yeah. So this is maybe for the first question. I did some studies more about it, but I can tell you in another context. And the second question was about how to bring empathy into online learning. I think, yes, this is a hint. It is really means an effort. And I think it depends a lot. It depends a lot if I'm a teacher and I knew my group very good and I know my group very good. Now they are online, but from before I have experience with them. This is such a difference, because then I can organize them, for example, in little WhatsApp groups. I can also bring the pupils together. I can ask them to look behind each other, to put some question each day. How are you doing? How can I help you? Yeah. And also me as a teacher, I know the pupils who might need more help. If I'm a good teacher, I know a bit about the context of my pupils. Nevertheless, I think that it would be very important I'm here now in Costa Rica. So here I'm talking all the time, but it's so important in countryside at least to have little groups being able to come together. Let's say once a week, twice a week, but there are some pupils, they need to have following up. They need to have some response to their working. They have no kind of response. They're completely lost. Nobody knows where they are, and nobody's interested in them. We even don't know if they have enough food. Yeah. So because they eat in the school. Now everything, the first month they gave some food to the houses, but I think this is not possible. We need some places. Also with COVID, we can have together little groups with distance, and the more need to have a place, an educational context to come together, even though they just talk about their experiences and where they need more help. And then I can see how I organize it. But I need, as an adult and as a teacher and as a school and as a society, we can go wider. We need to look behind. We cannot just sit in our well-established apartments and say, oh, I'm so social because I'm not harming anybody. I'm so secure. I'm not going out. I'm not doing anything. I'm so social. This is not being social. This is being egoistic also, because I'm just keeping for myself and take care for my health, for maybe that I'm not passing by the virus, but it's not enough for children in need and for youngsters in need. We always had to do more, and we still need to do more. So I think it's a combination. I think first we really need to organize groups with teachers who know the groups, and also that the teachers are able and allowed to go behind pupils where they feel they need to go behind. So we need some exceptions for exceptional situations. And it always has been like this. This will not change, even though we have COVID-19 around us. Yeah, and we have possibilities. We have good masks. We have in the South American countries and here Latin American countries, now is summertime coming, so we can sit outside with wide distance, but we can anyhow being a bit together and taking care for each other. And people, they need to feel that they are not hidden, that somehow people is interesting in them, even though they cannot be online or they have no mobile phone. Even in Germany, we don't have to speak from Latin America. In Germany, we have schools with so bad internet. They have a problem in the richest country of the world. They have problems to get pupils' laptops. Imagine something like that. There you see where we are and what big effort the society is doing to offer a good education. Yeah. So there's a lot to do, and things are coming out now with this pandemic because we need different answers. And you see how good is the education system in the way how it is able to give answers. And for the German system, I can tell you they are horrible in giving answers. And I knew before, but it's showing again. Don't think it's only Brazil or Costa Rica. No, even Germany is really hardly moving.
Okay, thanks very much, Suzanne. I'm just conscious of time a little bit. Rainer, you want to ask a question? Maybe take one more question if you wouldn't mind, and we'll wrap things up.
I just wanted to make a comment on just what Susanne was saying and what others of you were saying. When COVID-19 will be over in some way and school starts regularly, then I'm afraid it will start with contents, because contents is, at least in Germany, is the main part. Everybody was enraged that that schools are being closed again because the pupils lose chances. I mean, to think about it really, what chances they lose if there is a 3-month lockdown of schools or a 2-month lockdown of schools, I don't understand, because what these concentrating on contents really is, it's just the old filling up the students with some sort of knowledge. And it became clear now within new attempts to establish ESD, and it became clear that students learned in classes that about agriculture, about the consequences of meat production, and during lunch break they go to the cafeteria and they have their meat. And this is something which really becomes open for all who would want to see that it's not enough to transfer some sort of knowledge, because it doesn't lead to any action necessarily, and it doesn't lead to the aimed action if the conditions in the institution of the school are the other way around. And so this, I think this is, and this also applies to empathy. I mean, I'm not a teacher, I'm teachers training, but only further education, not initial teachers training. And during the last 20 years, we were always talking about trust, about empathy from the side of the teachers towards the pupils. And the system does not reward something like this if a teacher does it. It's the contrary.
I agree. I agree. Okay. Thank you very much, Rainer. Thank you very much. I'm just conscious it's almost 5:15, 4:15, 5:15 where you are.
May I say something?
Yes, you can, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add to all of these that at this stage, when we have online classes every day, as I see it, the most important is relationship, which we have to achieve with students, and then is respect, respect students, trust, and fun, Bill.
Yeah.
Like you said, trust, respect, and fun. I think this is the most important. And if you achieve good relationship with students, then you can achieve almost everything. If they have technology, which here in Slovenia they have, but you have to be focused on basic skills, not the content of everything which we supposed to teach children. I mean, we are talking about empathy really much lately. And how is this important? And I must say, when I have online classes every day, my colleague here, Marusha, she's gym teacher. She comes into my class. She jumps in with some really interesting tasks for children so they can move, and it's really great. Nobody is missing. No one day of these last weeks, no one was missing. And children, they want more. So we do different things. They are really creative, and yes, of course, they want to come together. They want to be together, but at this moment they can't. But they work in groups, on Zoom groups, and they do really creative things. And I'm really happy with this. Really, really. Of course, I want to go back to school. Everybody wants to go back to school. But this situation, I mean, it's possible. It's possible. With individual work with children with special needs, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, but I think we are good at it. Don't you think, Marusha?
Oh, yes, I do.
Excellent. Yeah, I think a friend of mine has a phrase, he calls it pockets of wonderful things. And I think it's listening to you, Damiana, there are lots of pockets of wonderful things going on. The problem is to bring them all together and make it into a coherent kind of experience for children that isn't just about content and isn't just about results. It actually is about relationships, development, empathy, and understanding. That's really where we need to go. Okay. Look, I'm just really overwhelmed by the quality and the interest and the discussion today. It's now 5:15. We're still talking. It's 6:15 in Europe. So I'm going to bring the seminar webinar to a close, if that's okay. A very special thanks to everybody for coming, and particularly to Suzanne and Anton for opening up a fantastic discussion, providing us with some really interesting ideas and thoughts, and looking forward to more in the new year. And please God, in 2021, we will have more webinars and hopefully a face-to-face get-together. But in the meantime, on behalf of the Learning Teacher Network, could I wish everybody a really happy Christmas, a safe Christmas. Please take care of yourselves, and we will look forward to talking and meeting again very soon.
Okay. Thank you, Martin.
Take care.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
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 Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.